I'm going to give you just a little touch of a reading that touches into discussion in a literal fashion of what I just did on my car and then spoke against peradventure more or less and blessed what I've done and also Sorcerer Supreme. Here you go. Here's the discussion, okay? Calusa also gave an answer as to where the fifth dimension was. And once again, this is from the book METAPHYSICAL, Physics of the Impossible, okay? So let's keep a look. Let's take a look at this, okay? Here we go. Calusa also gave an answer as to where the fifth dimension was. Since we see no evidence of a fifth dimension, it must have curled up so small that it cannot be observed. Take note of that idea in terms of the unraveling and binding something up in terms of the arrows going the other way and the objects, the functional metaphysical objects on my car that I put, 8 of them, okay? Think about it. So small that it cannot be observed. Imagine taking, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Okay, this is the problem with those who do not recognize the reality. When you don't recognize the reality, but because an issue is too bound up to be noticeable, doesn't mean it does not exist. Okay, these are problems that when you have people in authority that are ignorant and willfully ignorant, that know this is the truth, but insist on trampling it underfoot, who reject intellectualism of this kind, which is pivotal in CRUX, you're going to have a problematic reality of a world and a universe, and it is a bottomless pit. It cascades. It's worse than a domino effect. Things literally collapse at a certain point, and we all fall down on top of each other in our abyss of ignorance, and there's no limit to how deep it gets, how high or wide. It becomes a universe of stupidity, and when this universe of deliberate ignorance fills the universe, it overlaps it and becomes the universe and blocks you from existing in the universe, and you live in this secondary minimal existence of death in a universe that's rejecting itself. Okay, once again, a form of outrageous cosmological schizophrenia. So here you go, let's continue to read. Since we see no evidence of a fifth dimension, and it must have curled up so small that it cannot be observed. Imagine taking a two-dimensional sheet of paper and rolling it up tightly into a cylinder once again. And when you look at the objects I've made at a straight horizontal look, something like that curled up paper, it will look just like those cylinders. But what? The arrow's going in the wrong direction, sealed up. From a distance, the cylinder looks like a one-dimensional line, see? And this is what you would see. In this way, a two-dimensional object has been turned into a one-dimensional object by curling it up. Once again, perspective. The solution and problem of perspective come into view. This is the reality with every subject we deal with, right down into the deepest subatomic level. As I said, I'm confronting things on the level of the force, gluon, and wrenches. The power and the force that holds matter together, not and I'm going past the quarks, okay? Think about it. Calusa's paper initially created a sensation, but in the coming years, objections were found to his theory. What was the size of this new fifth dimension? How did it curl up? No answers could be found. For decades, Einstein would work on this theory in fits and starts. After he passed away in 1955, the theory was soon forgotten, becoming just a strange footnote in the evolution of physics. All started string theory. All this has changed with the coming of a startling new theory called the superstring theory. By the 1980s, physicists were drowning in a sea of subatomic particles. Every time they smashed an atom apart with powerful particle accelerators, they found scores of new particles spitting out. And once again, superstring, in a sense, is represented by what? The taking apart of an issue. It turns into what? A superstring. From the cylinder to the superstring, exactly my point. Okay, it's right here in the book. At least in the most abstract hypothetical sense, there is a point of touching and agreement, okay, with what I just did on my car, the reality of the metaphysics. Okay, so let's continue. It was so frustrating that J. Robert Oppenheimer declared that the Nobel Prize in Physics should go to the physicists who did not discover a new particle that year. Enrico Fermi, horrified at the proliferation of subatomic particles with Greek-sounding names, said, "If I could remember the names of all these particles, I would have become a botanist." After decades of hard work, this zoo of particles could be arranged into something called the Standard Model. Billions of dollars, the sweat of thousands of engineers and physicists, and 20 Nobel Prizes have gone into painfully assembling, piece by piece, the Standard Model. It is a truly remarkable theory which seems to fit all the experimental data concerning subatomic physics. But the Standard Model, for all its experimental successes, suffered from one serious defect. As Stephen Hawking says, it is ugly and ad hoc. It contains at least 19 free parameters, including the particle masses and the strength of their interactions with other particles, 36 quarks and antiquarks, 3 exact and redundant copies of subarticles, and a host of strange-sounding subatomic particles, such as tau neutrinos, Yang-Mills gluons, Higgs bosons, W bosons, and Z particles. Worse, the Standard Model makes no mention of gravity. It seems hard to believe that the nature at its most supreme, fundamental level could be so haphazard and supremely inelegant. Here was a theory only a mother could love. The sheer inelegance of the Standard Model forced physicists to reanalyze all their assumptions about nature. Something was terribly wrong. If one analyzes the last few centuries in physics, one of the most important achievements of the last century was to summarize all fundamental physics into 2 great theories: the quantum theory, represented by the Standard Model, and Einstein's theory of general relativity, describing gravity. Remarkably, together they represent the sum total of all physical knowledge at a fundamental level. The first theory describes the world of the very small, the subatomic quantum world, where particles perform a fantastic dance, darting in and out of existence and appearing 2 places at the same time. The second theory describes the world of the very large, such as black holes and the Big Bang, and uses the language of smooth surfaces, stretched fabrics, and warped surfaces. The theories are opposites in every way. Using different mathematics, different assumptions, and different physical pictures. It's as if nature had 2 hands, neither of which communicated with one another. Furthermore, any attempt to join these 2 theories has led to meaningless answers. For half a century, any physicist who tried to mediate a shotgun wedding between the quantum theory and general relativity found that the theory blew up in their faces, producing infinite answers that made no sense. And now you just saw me do the literal shotgun eternal wedding. It wasn't so much a wedding as it was a reality I'm acknowledging and I'm going to affirm, because it's something that, as you understand, that the problem has become this: the specialty of subatomic physics and all these theories cannot exist and does not exist of its own. It is not an island to itself. That is the concept in what I practice as a metaphysician and as a mystic. You have to conjoin and stay current with all areas, crux, and cutting edge of knowledge, because at a certain point you reach a dead end, and you have to include other crux areas of knowledge, or you go no further. This is the reality of crux, and as I said, as Eros with sex and the Sex Act, it's the same thing. It is not functioning in the way because it becomes a heresy, not a reality, and it becomes your super niche reality becomes a heresy and a disconnect from it, and a contradiction, which is why I made the statement of a wedding of the reality of the Jedi, the Force, the gluons. Those that I knew as right-wing extremists all apostatized and cursed me with Jedi curses as an apostate, but they fell away at the point of being wrong-way Jedi, because you can go no further than the Force, okay? And as what I did just now counts, it is now undoing all those statements, so I did it live on the internet, okay? So in the realm of the power that holds matter together, they apostatize at the highest level. It becomes a statement where you can gain the highest power if no one like me rises up, but the lowest weakness and sorrow in the eternal state. It's a Vormir, okay? So my everlasting exchange was to gain the most power in the Force, but not use it as a point of falling away, but a standard unlike the angels that stepped away from their first position and left their first estate, which is what is done. They attain Jedi and then fall from it. Okay? So once again, there's the difference between being. But now the problem is this. Because I have basically expressed what I am as a Jedi and in the Force, CRUX, VERBA, CRUX, RHETOS, CRUX, Logos, CRUX, Cathedra, now those who curse me at that point and use that as a point of apostasy will get shafted and they'll fail, or otherwise they would have continued. It becomes an absolute abysmal failure for them. Temporal and eternal, it is now their doom and ruin.